Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor just blasted Clarence Thomas in no uncertain terms. These Supremes are turning into dream girls, and I don't ever want to hear Clarence Thomas sing, and I'm telling you I'm not going. The man should just go. Welcome to Occupy Democrats. I'm David Reddish. As you may have heard, the Supreme Court closed out its week and its most recent term with several controversial decisions, including one blocking lower court injunctions against presidential acts. The case involved birthright citizenship, and while the court has yet to actually rule on Trump's attempt to do away with it, thus nullifying potentially millions of people's citizenship, it still could create chaos. So could the court's ruling on schools acknowledging LGBTQ people and their history. Take a look.
I'm going to pivot for a moment because we just got a new ruling on a different case we're watching for at the Supreme Court involving LGBTQ plus books in Maryland in elementary schools. Lisa, bring us that decision.
This case was brought by some parents in a Maryland school district who objected to the presence of books with LGBTQ themes in their child's classroom without a right to opt out from it. And today, by a 6-3 majority in a decision written by Justice Alito, perhaps the greatest defender of the free exercise clause among this current court, the court is holding that just the presence of these books alone without an opt-out right is a burden on religious exercise that has been found unacceptable under court precedent that says parents have the right to direct the religious upbringing of their children. They talk about a particular book called Prince and Knight, which is about a prince not finding his princess, but rather finding a partnership with a knight. And they say, look, the message of that book is that same-sex marriage should be accepted by all as a cause for celebration. Maybe high school students can differentiate the fact that just because something has widespread approval doesn't mean it's right for them. But elementary school students are likely to walk away with the message that this is moral across the board and should be a cause for celebration. That is antithetical to the way in which these plaintiffs want to raise their children, and there is significant diversity of opinion enough, religiously grounded, that we cannot tolerate that policy. It's a predictable result based on the oral argument in the case, but one of the things that's unusual about it is oftentimes in these cases, the plaintiffs are conservative Christians. Here, the plaintiffs are some Muslim parents.
Angry yet? You're not alone. Stay with me. The case, Mahmoud v. Taylor, was fairly absurd from the get-go. The book that triggered it all featured a gay uncle, and if schools can't even acknowledge that queer people exist, we're in big trouble. Then again, as a queer of a certain age myself, this frankly comes as no big surprise. I grew up in an era when schools couldn't even mention gay, lesbian, or transgender people unless it had to do with how they spread HIV. And let me tell you, it made things really silly. Learning about Leonardo and Michelangelo and never acknowledging why their subjects always looked so distinctively hot-muscled and young. Studying mythology and hearing that Heracles and his young hot companion Hylas were just good friends. Sure, Jan. If you're frustrated by that logic, you're not alone. Wise old Latina Sonia Sotomayor, who has taken over for her friend Ruth Bader Ginsburg as the court's most fiery dissenter, tore into the decision and its author, Clarence Thomas. Multiple outlets, including the Huffington Post, detail Sotomayor's rage over the decision, which ruled school curriculum should adhere to history and tradition. Sotomayor wrote, quote, "Under Justice Thomas's test, it appears schools may have no compelling interest in teaching anything beyond those topics. It is not clear either how far back Justice Thomas would have courts look. Should courts limit their inquiry to the founding era or the 19th century for guidance on which topics schools have a sufficiently compelling interest in teaching for purposes of this history and tradition test?" End quote. She further added, quote, "It is inconceivable that learning should be shackled to a moment in time. What of the parent who wants his child's curriculum stripped of any mention of women working outside the home, sincerely averring that such activity conflicts with the family's religious beliefs?" Close quote. And Justice Sotomayor is correct. This decision opens the door to extraordinary educational regression. If a family's religious beliefs hold that women voting or holding educated professions violates their beliefs, how will a school handle that? Will they kick those kids out of the classroom? Or will they, more likely, avoid the subject altogether? What happens when a family decides racial equality violates their faith? You know who I mean. What happens then? Can we not teach about slavery or the civil rights movement? Or is all of this, at least in the mind of Clarence Thomas, just a wink, wink, nudge, nudge that gay people are gross, so let's not talk about them? Look, it's the last weekend of Pride Month, so I am not going to hold back right now. I'm just going to say that you cannot understand what it means to a queer kid to not be acknowledged anywhere in school. I can't tell you how confusing it is, or how lonely it is, and how utterly infuriating it is once you reach adulthood and then learn what was hidden from you. And when school won't even allow a teacher to say you exist, and that's okay, when instructors are forced to hide parts of life from all students, it creates a culture of fear and hatred. Kids aren't stupid. They know that something must be really bad if nobody talks about it. And since in school, a kid can learn about war, torture, corruption, genocide, sex scandals, religious fanaticism, and witch hunts, something must be the worst thing ever if you can't talk about it at all. Like Justice Sotomayor, we get the message, Clarence. So here's one from a proud queer. You sexual harassing, hypocritical, sedition-endorsing sack of piping hot crap. You can go to hell, and when you drop dead, I will go to your funeral in a red sequin caftan. And good riddance. This is Occupy Democrats.